I always wanted to work in animation, and my parents, both being artists, were like, of course you're going to do that. You're not going to be a doctor.
Welcome to the Lighter Darker podcast, where we talk about the creative process of filmmaking and the art of visual storytelling. We share stories to entertain and inspire the next generation of visual storytellers to join our ranks. So thank you so much for joining us. This is our second episode, 2 of 20 episodes planned for our first season. This releases every other Tuesday, and it is great to have you all with us today. I'm Rob Brado. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at ILM and SVP of Creative Innovation at Lucasfilm. And as always, Jenny Ely, our producer.
I'm Jenny Ely, a production manager at ILM.
Since Todd's on vacation, we have a special guest to join me and Jenny to host today's podcast. Writer, director, story artist, actor, won an Oscar for Toy Story 4. He was a writer on Inside Out, a whole bunch more award wins and nominations. But most recently, the director of Transformers 1, which is coming out in theaters this weekend in the U.S. and around the world. Check your local listings. So welcome to the podcast, Josh Cooley.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
So fun to have you here. So we got 3 sections for today's show. We got a few questions from the mailbag, which will be really fun to get us started. If we have time, we'll squeeze in a feature about rejection letters. Always fun to do with a new guest and talk about kind of that journey to success that Josh has had. And then our main topic is going to be about humor and heart, because, boy, when I think of Josh's movies, that's what I think of, like that combination and how surprising that can be, how it can work in your favor, and all keeping that in balance. Let's start with some questions. Do you have one from the mailbag for him?
I do. I have a few good ones. All right. So our first one is from Sean Calra. And Sean writes in, do you outline the entire story before writing it, or do you jump straight into writing the screenplay?
For me personally, I have to outline it. People, say they jump in and just start writing the screenplay, which is an approach. But for me, I just need to see the structure of it all. I think that's probably because I came out of story and just learning about structure and just needing to see what the Christmas tree looks like before you put the ornaments on it.
For you, is it a pretty detailed outline, or do you grow out to a scriptment, or you?
It's like I want to know what the very easy, what the simple arc of the movie is, of the story, and then letting it grow off of that. Mm-hmm. I think you have to. For me personally, I need to have the ending. I need where the roadmap's going to.
Yeah. And then do you write from beginning to end, or do you write scenes and then? Or does it vary?
It varies.
Yeah,
it just depends on
the show.
Every movie I've worked on has been completely different from the last. There's nothing that's been. Even from one movie to the sequel that I've worked on, it's like everything's been different every time.
Well, and even your roles on every show have been quite. I mean, you've been in story, you've been writing, you've been directing, and kind of you've worn all these hats.
When you put it that way, I started in story, and I think everything kind of grew out of that, really. Mm-hmm. And when you're a story artist, you're basically a mini director. You have your little sequence, and then you are drawing it out and hoping the director likes it, and then changing it. So nothing's precious. And then when you're a writer, you're basically picturing what the movie's going to be, but instead of drawing it, you're writing it. So it all came out of the same place.
That's great. I like Ahmed's question here, Jenny.
Yes, we have a great question from Ahmed Turkey, who's one of our R&D artists in our London studio. Ahmed wants to know who would win in a fight between Woody and Optimus Prime.
Oh. Really, Ahmed? I mean, one of them is a toy, a rag toy from the 50s, and the other one is a robot that's, however many feet tall he is. It varies sometimes, I think.
And also a toy from the 80s. I mean,
yeah.
Right. Well, I'm thinking of the actual Optimus Prime, the real one.
I'm sorry. Real Optimus
If Josh
Prime.
Cooley as a kid was playing with a Woody toy and an Optimus Prime toy, would you have them team up or would you have them fight each other?
Oh, man. I did some really bizarre team ups as a kid, so I don't know. I think it would definitely change. Yeah, somebody would backstab the other one.
That's great.
Excellent. Okay, that's a good answer. So our next one is from Nathan Camp from our San Francisco studio. And Nathan says, I understand you used some virtual production techniques during pre-production. Can you speak to that process using virtual production tools and how that may have influenced your approach to these characters and bringing them to life? And I think before you answer, maybe we should explain what virtual production is, if there's a simple explanation for that, for people who are listening who might not know.
Yeah. Well, do you want to describe it, Josh?
I'll try my best.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to work on a 3D film, CG film, is to get into the computer as fast as humanly possible. Storyboards are cheats. You're just going to, an artist draws it one way, but when you actually get into the virtual set, it's totally different. So to be able to get into the computer as fast as possible is so informative and gives you so much information, and you can start to see the movie much faster. Yeah. So this idea of, we called it VSR, virtual story reels. So what we would do is, has any other movie done this?
I mean, there's been aspects of it. I think at Pixar there was some, I know, and we've done it here on various movies dating back to
Rango.
Yeah, dating back to Rango, we use some virtual story techniques where you're capturing real cameras. But you kind of took it further with having the actors and the cameras to really block out these scenes.
This really, I think it worked well because our characters were basically humans. So we'd be on the capture stage, and we would have really rough versions of our characters, of Orion Pax and D16 and Bumblebee and Alita. And we'd get motion capture actors to fill those roles. And it became very rough, almost like a layout, really rough. And it was really fun because I was able to, direct them like it was a play, like it was live action. And just knowing that we'd get the performance first, and then we would go back in once that's recorded, and we would find the camera angles that we wanted, which was so awesome. It was just so great. But it was odd because we would have the scratch already recorded. So they're basically acting to this pre-recorded dialogue.
They're miming on the stage.
Yeah. And I'm giving direction to just their body movements. So it was a weird, almost like a dissection of live action in a way, but it was really fun. And it was really rewarding just to see, we would storyboard it out really rough first, knowing that we wouldn't need to board the entire sequence because it would be all in VSR. So, that's how we did it. And we did it, I wouldn't say probably 5 or 6 times we came here and used the stage and did it. It was always an adventure. Like, what's going to happen this time?
Well, and I remember the very first day you did some testing. I think we all had in our mind that the virtual production capture process would be most useful for these big action sequences, and I think you used it a little bit for that. But it ended up being the talking sequences where you had to do more complicated blocking and a lot of different eye lines, where I think you found it to be the quickest way to experiment, right?
Yeah, so specifically with this, we thought it would be for action, but it was like our characters, the heights are all different. And so that's where getting into the computer immediately was super helpful. And also, these characters, their shoulders are massive. And so it's like having football players in full uniform walking around. And that was the first time I went, we need to pull the camera back, on everything.
Right.
Just so that we can see everybody in the shot. So it was extremely informative that way.
So for those of you listening who may not have a clear picture in your mind, this is a motion capture stage down here. We're actually in our San Francisco office right now, so it's actually just downstairs from where we're sitting right now recording this podcast. And it's actors in motion capture suits, which are just tight suits with these markers on them, and they can perform face and body. So they were actually wearing head cams, so they could mime to the pre-recorded audio. And we also marker up virtual cameras, so Josh and his DP can walk around the scene while they're acting, or maybe they've already done the acting and it's pre-recorded and they can block in new cameras. And when they walk away from that day's shoot, they're walking away with tape of all the dailies as if they had been on a live action set, but it's actually, it's Transformers moving exactly the way the actors were moving on stage, kind of live.
Yeah, that was a trip, seeing our actors move and then seeing through the magic mirrors.
Yes, magic mirrors.
Or windows, however we were describing it, that you could just see them doing the exact same movement on the set that we already built. Like, that was crazy.
Yeah, so in addition to looking through a camera, which is basically a monitor with some markers on it and some controls, we also have TVs that are turned sideways, kind of shaped like a mirror. And you can roll those around the stage, and the actors can see themselves in those TVs, but we have them configured to be a mirror so they know how to perform with those huge virtual shoulders on, these big, basically turned into a transformer of the right scale, so they could each play the right character.
Yeah, and some of the characters would be larger than others, so we had to, call out where the eye line needs to be. You need to look, 4 feet above their head as opposed to looking into their eyes. I don't remember who said it. It was we realized we don't want to do it for the action stuff. We wanted to do it for these talking scenes because we could have them emote as well, which would be huge in the story reels to have that. And I remember seeing somebody's face confusion of like, you want it for the talking scenes.
That's right.
It's like, okay.
It seems counterintuitive, but the amount of time that's spent like if you're doing a scene like just shooting this podcast, people talking around a table, refining eye lines, getting the sizes right. And of course, you can do that all in layout and in Maya or different 3D tools. And you had an amazing layout team did amazing sequences on this film, both at Paramount and then, supplemented with some ILM artists maybe have contributed a little bit in different parts. But this gave you a tool that you could rough these scenes together much, much more quickly, even though it was going to get reanimated in animation. This wasn't an animation mocap movie. This was an animated movie.
Right. I came from an animation background, so when this idea was first brought up, I was like, wait a second, hold on.
Right.
Mocap. I don't know about that. It's just not I like the hand animated even through the computer. Like at first I was a little like, what's happening here? Because my mind, having not worked with Paramount or this team before, being like, are we going to get to a point where they say we don't have time to animate this? We just use the mocap and then it looks weird compared to everything else. So I was a little wary at first, but then after that first day, I was like, oh, I see what this is. I see how we could use it.
And we have this real-time facial capture system, which works with the head cams, which is really slick. And we intentionally for this show, I think it was from your direction and your team, made sure that the fidelity of the faces was clear enough to communicate the emotions, but not trying to be a full human.
That's what it was.
Not trying to be the final animation.
That's what it was. It was when we said, can we get less emotion? We don't want to look like Avatar, for example.
Right.
We don't need that detail. We just need it to be very rudimentary. And I remember it was like, okay, let's figure out how to do less.
That's right. Turn it down just a little bit.
Yeah.
But that ended up being the right thing to cut into your story reels, so you had a sense of the whole movie at a built up to a certain level. Yeah.
I mean, when you had that, first of all, you had it a lot faster than cutting it like it was storyboards. Because my editor had footage, to work with, and it was great. And then on top of that, the animators had that to start with. Like they had a really great reference that I've already seen and directed through, and so they have something to begin with.
A really clear launch. Mm-hmm. No, that's really fun. Well, thank you, Nathan, for that question. Now, he is in our virtual production department, so that might have been a little self-serving, but it worked out really well. Prompted a really good conversation.
Nathan asked that?
I think
Yes.
Nathan just wanted you to say it was amazing.
Obviously.
How did Nathan do on the motion capture stage? Was he okay?
Well...
Okay, you don't have to say it. You don't have to say on the air.
That was great. Everybody on the stage was awesome. It was really fun.
The team loved collaborating with you down there.
Do you think it'll be hard to go back to doing animated films any other way now? Are you going to want live people to play around with it?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is. I mean, that's why it worked so well for this movie, because it was Transformers. Mm-hmm. And if you were doing it with, I don't know, something that's not bipedal and human looking, then it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen our mocap people do dinosaurs.
Well, yeah.
If you need raptors, we got this standing by. Well, let's transition over to talk about rejection letters.
Oh, no.
This is fun. People always say you learn more from your mistakes and your successes. But, of course, these kind of moments when we're celebrating a really fun movie like Transformers 1, it's easy to just focus on, all the highlights.
It is easy, which is why we should do that.
Okay, well,
no, I'm totally joking. You want me to talk about my big rejection?
We'd love to, especially, for people getting started, they may be facing various challenges, and to hear from somebody who's so accomplished.
Oh, well, so now I'm really going to hit the bottom of the barrel with this story. I always wanted to work in animation my entire life. I don't remember a time when I didn't. And my parents, both being artists, were like, well, of course. Of course you're going to do that. You're not going to be a doctor. You're going to be an animator. So they were completely supportive, and I was just like, yep, I'm going to be an animator. Went to animation school, went to art school, graduated, and that's right when Disney was shutting down all the animation studios. Wow. All the commercial houses that were doing 2D animation were shutting down. I was basically I just learned a dead art. Then I thought, well, storyboards are kind of, they're like key animation poses, so I could do that, and live action needs that. So I got interested in that. And so, but that was right my final semester of the school. So I graduate. And then moved back in with my parents, which is always, you're going in the right direction when that happens. And then it got to a point where my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, so there's a happy ending to the story. She's like, you need to get a job. And I was like, I'm going to be in animation. I'm going to do it. And she believed me the whole time. But out of my bullheadedness, I got an application to Chuck E. Cheese. And just because...
Oh, no. This isn't the rejection letter, I
Oh
hope.
my gosh.
Well, the actual rejection letter would be, still have the rejection letters from Disney and Pixar.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, I'm keeping those.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
It says a 16-year veteran of Pixar.
18.
18-year veteran.
Yeah. But that was before all that. But so at one point, when I got the actual call from Pixar, because I met Joe Ranft, who was head of story at the time, to come on as an intern on Cars and The Incredibles, I had in my hand the application to Chuck E. Cheese. And when I went into Chuck E. Cheese to get it, the manager was so excited because he's like, "You're tall, like you'll fit the costume perfectly." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do this. I'll show my girlfriend." And then, unfortunately, Pixar called me and I decided, I was like, which one do I do?
Josh, I want you to know that my first job was at Chuck E. Cheese's.
I kind of genuinely wanted to work there.
I worked there
Yeah.
in high school.
How was it?
It was pretty awful.
Oh, man.
I mean, if you like being surrounded by screaming, upset kids and
Yeah, I don't.
sticky pizza and, yeah.
I didn't think about that part.
Yeah, at least
Friend
the one
of-
I worked out did not serve alcohol. We were one of the only ones that didn't. So thank goodness, because being in East Tennessee with alcohol at a Chuck E. Cheese,
Wow.
not the life you want.
Yeah, that was a turning point in my career path for sure.
So you literally you were that close to Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
And that's when Pixar came through with an internship.
Yes, because I had met Joe Ranft about 6 months earlier, I just kept in touch with him, and I got in through the back door for sure. I remember specifically, I was at my parents' house, I had the application like in my hand, and then remember answering machines?
Oh, yeah.
I clicked the answering machine, and I heard them wanted to offer me the job, and I jumped up and did like one of those, yeah, or like if it was the end of the movie, it would have freeze frame.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I punched the ceiling, and my hand got all bloody because it was one of those cottage cheese ceilings. So like I'm falling on the ground, bloody hand, and a Chuck E. Cheese application in one hand, in the other hand, and I'm just like happy.
This is the moment
really
to-
bizarre.
That's amazing.
I need you to draw that moment.
I mean, this is the perfect segue to talk about humor and heart in your movies, because this is literally your life story is what you bring to your movies. The combination of the Chuck E. Cheese application and a bleeding hand and an invitation to come board at Pixar under Joe Ranft.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's just unreal. I still can't
Amazing.
believe it. Yeah.
And 18 years there, starting as an intern, ending up directing and winning an Oscar for Toy Story 4. I mean,
Yeah.
what an incredible run.
I had an amazing education, and I don't think anybody else ever had, which is I met Joe Ranft. He asked me to come in. I was technically the first story intern at Pixar ever. And as soon as I got there, fell in love with everybody on the story teams, and I was like, I am not leaving this place. So it's like first one in, last to leave kind of thing. Yeah, so I was able to kind of bounce between Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, just constantly, because everyone needed some help at a certain time. And so for 6 months as an intern, I was working with all the best people in the best movies. It was really great.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then Joe was my mentor throughout the whole thing.
That's remarkable.
Yep.
What an incredible place to get to experience filmmaking. And you think of that era of those films.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't said it yet, but I saw Transformers 1 an early screening yesterday. It is so much fun, and it has so much heart, and it's so hilarious, which you can see from the trailers. You really brought a lot of those hard-earned skills to the table here. Is that what attracted you to this film?
What got me attracted to Transformers 1 was I read the script, but it was actually the first line of the script. Because at first I was thinking, okay, Transformers, I've seen the live action ones. I was thinking it's going to be that same vein. The first line of the script was, over black, it said, "This screen has been reformatted to fit your puny Earth screens." Or this film has been reformatted to fit your puny Earth screens. And I was like, what is this? Like, that made me laugh out loud.
That's
and
great.
so immediately, even though it was way more comic than what we ended up doing, just because tone-wise it didn't feel quite right, but it caught my attention and made me go, oh, they want to do something different here. I'm already leaning in because I just want to do something that's surprising.
Well, I mean, and when I think of your last two movies that I've seen with Toy Story 4 and Transformers 1, both of those surprise and over-deliver on a premise. I mean, I loved the first three Toy Stories. And when Pixar says a Toy Story 4 is coming out, you go like, well, I trust Pixar is going to make something great, but I didn't order a Toy Story 4. And here with Transformers 1, like, you don't know what it's going to be. What is an animated, detailed-looking Transformers 1 going to be that is kind of an homage to some of those cartoons of the 80s? Like, you surprise people and over-deliver with these premises.
Well, I feel why, I don't want to make something that people go, oh yeah, that's what I knew it was going to be, because who cares about that? I want to do something that's different and makes people go, I didn't realize it could be like that.
Yes.
That's where I get excited when I watch a movie and go like, whoa, I had no idea that's even possible. Like that's that's my goal every time.
Yeah. So is humor and heart, are those two components pretty fundamental to your filmmaking, or is that just me reading over the top of a couple movies that I happen to love?
I love to laugh. I love to make jokes, even outside of, working on a film. And then the heart is what makes people actually connect to the movie.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of really funny movies, but then nothing. They're kind of like, okay, that was funny. Now what's for dinner? But if you've got something, it's also like a huge magic trick, which I love. It's like everything on screen, nothing exists. It's not physically there. It's all ones and zeros. But to make somebody look at a bunch of ones and zeros 24 frames a second and then start to cry, like that's crazy.
Right.
But I love it. And so I don't know, maybe I just love manipulation. I don't know. But it's to connect with people that way is just, for me, that's the goal.
That's great.
Yeah.
And how do you keep it in balance? Like, I imagine you have jokes, you always have jokes you can throw in. You can always make a moment funnier, but sometimes it's going to undermine the sincerity, and sometimes it's exactly right. There's moments in this movie where pretty intense things are happening and the jokes are coming a mile a minute and it's all working together. And there's other times where you let it ride without an interruption, without a laugh.
It's a hard one to figure out, because sometimes, and we'll have gag sessions or other writers helping out, and they'll throw out things that are hilarious. And you're like, oh, that's got to stay in the movie. And then you watch it all in context and you're going, that joke is pulling the attention away from what is important.
Right.
I would say that's one of the hardest jobs as a director, is going, is this thing, whether it's a joke or whether it's a story beat or a line of dialogue, is this actually helping the movie or is it hurting it?
And how do you keep fresh eyes, because you're very close to the project and you've seen every sequence hundreds of times, and you're trying to consistently evaluate with that fresh set of perspective? Like, what are your tricks for keeping the correct amount of distance so you can see that?
I'd say having an editor that you trust is extremely important. Like, that kind of feels obvious to say, but there have been times that I've worked with editors, and Lynn Hobson, who cut Transformers 1, phenomenal. And we had the great relationship where she'd go like, let me show you something. And I go, okay. And just knowing that she's going to do something I'm not going to like. And then I look at it and I go, that was great. What did you do? And she goes, you didn't miss it. I'm like, what? And she goes, I cut this and this. I'm like, right. And she's right. Like, it works better without it. And I didn't miss it.
So she was able to kill some of your darlings and then trick you into...
She's a serial killer of my darlings. But I always, it's always the thing you think you need. But so I guess to answer your question, I trust my crew.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you find and use test screenings to see it through an audience's eyes? Or was that part of your process on this film?
Yeah. We had 4 test screenings with completely fresh audiences. There's no other way to tell if a joke works or not. That's what you need.
Yeah, for sure. So on this movie, you had all of the people working for you on the film, probably hundreds, certainly more than a couple hundred just here at ILM. And so you have this huge
Let's
crew.
name them all. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's name it. We're going to go through the credits now.
There's Nathan.
Nathan. Uh-huh.
And then you have your team that you're working with every day at Paramount. And then you're reporting up to, at the head of the credits, there's Paramount Animation, there's Hasbro. There's a lot of people to make happy above you as well. As the director, it's your movie, but there's a lot of people who have stakes. What are some of your tips? What are some of your learnings as you're managing both? You're managing big teams that are working for you, and you're managing up to probably large teams as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of producers on this film, but I gotta say, and I think this comes across, there was a perfect balance of Paramount, of Hasbro, DB Pictures. It was, everybody knew what we were going for, or knew what I was trying to aim for. And they trusted me. I really got to give them credit, because I told them after the first screening, I think I remember what Ramsey from Paramount, she said, "I'm really excited to see your first screening." And I said, "Me too. It's going to suck." And I remember seeing her face kind of drop, like, "What?" And I go, "We have to be wrong as fast as possible. It's not going to be good." And I was right. It's horrible. But you look at it and go, what works, what doesn't work. And they saw, but I never was like, here it is. I always knew that it can be better, because it's the truth. It can always be better. And I think they saw that and were like, okay, he's not being precious about anything.
And you were willing to show work that was, that you knew was still not close to your mark,
nice.
but you wanted to still get their input and evolve.
Yeah. It was important that, if I really kind of simplify it, Paramount was about like the general audience. How can we get everybody involved? Hasbro was like the lore and the fans are important. And then working with Lorenzo, who has all the history of all the other Transformers, he's like, this is what works and doesn't work with Transformers. So I took what I needed from everybody, and to find the balance that for me was the film that I wanted to make anyway, which was making all of them happy.
Does your confidence to be able to show work that is not to where it needs to be yet, but you can get it there, does that come from the years at Pixar and seeing story that was in progress, but you just had to put it up and keep working on it with a big group of people? Yeah.
I mean, being a story artist, you learn humility real quick. You'll show an entire sequence that you spent so much time on, and then the director goes, no, we're going to redo this. And then you're like, okay, that's all gone. And you have to be okay with that.
Right. You talked a little bit about lore and what Hasbro was focused on in the lore and the resource you had there to lean on. And in the opening 5 minutes of the movie, you invest, like, while you have everybody fresh, you're like, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen because it's going to matter later.
Yeah.
And you've got that in the first 5 minutes, and you lean into that.
Yeah, that was the short version of the lore, which was, we really refined it down to what's the simplest way to tell this.
Like literally what's the spark you need. Yeah,
because people are waiting to see what's going to happen, so you've got a limited amount of time to go, here's some hidden exposition, and even there's stuff happening during that exposition that was part of, like, we got to keep people not turn it into a history class.
Right. You have to have a ticking clock. You have something underneath.
Something that keep them invested, so they more absorb that information to remember it later. And also the visuals help.
Yes.
We have the visual there. So, but yeah, it was hard. There was how much lore is too much lore, and also they, when they came up with all these names, they never did it, I don't think, with a screenplay in mind. Right. There's a lot of Energon, Cybertron, Megatron, like it's just nonstop, matrix of leadership. What the hell does that mean?
You even have jokes in the movie that lean into that, which I love.
Yeah, it's just the wording is just, when you get somebody narrating it and just saying all these words. For somebody who's coming fresh into the audience, I want my grandma to be able to walk into this movie and watch it and fully understand as much as anybody else. But all these crazy sci-fi names right out the gate was a lot.
Well, it seemed like you used that motif, this kind of augmented reality particle world, to be able to get a lot of story across visually, very succinctly, a couple of different times in the film. So was that an important motif to be able to use as a way to accelerate through some of this?
Well, if it's a character standing there talking, you're not going to remember that. Yeah. But if you have a visual to go along with it, it totally helps. And also, I like to make the movie in a way where I'm of the belief that you turn the sound off and you should be able to pick up 80, 90% of the movie. So that's how I direct the animators. That's how I direct the story. Like, I want to be able to not rely on the dialogue.
Yeah. It's a movie, not a radio play.
Exactly.
So visual storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie does that so well. Super fun. I'm sure the effects animators loved all those millions of particles to be able to tell those stories visually, but it comes across in a spectacular way. I love it.
There's a sequence, and when people see it, they'll know which one it is. It's all done with particles. I remember pitching it to Island and Sydney and just kind of seeing their frozen face. I was like, did the Zoom freeze? And they're like, no, it was them. They're just going, okay. And I'm sure they turned off the Zoom and went like, how the hell are we going to do this? But they did it, man. They nailed it.
It looks great.
Yeah.
It really is. It feels very, very rich.
It's stunning. It's gorgeous.
when you're going into a recording session, you have such an incredible cast on this show. I'm very curious about your process, both like prepping and what you're doing in the room and how much improvisation you're doing, how much you're able to get multiple actors together, which might be impossible with this kind of cast with their schedules. Very curious about your process because it feels very natural. It comes across really nicely.
I'm so lucky to have such an amazing, not just great performers, but just great people. All of them are just phenomenal and just so awesome. The way that I like to cast is I don't want to know who I'm listening to. And so if that's possible, I don't want to, I don't want to know at all. And I tell the casting department, don't tell me ahead of time. I don't want a list of who these people are. That's kind of the opposite of what execs like and what marketing likes. But I don't, and I challenge them to listen without knowing who it was. And I think that was informative for them too, because they were like, oh, this person that we loved doesn't sound the way we thought they did. And that's just the trick. Like,
right.
A lot of actors, you need their face because that's what they do. They act with their body. It's very difficult to act with just your voice. It's not easy at all. And so I like to not know who it is. I also like to listen to them on talk shows, not performances that they're doing on other movies, because I want them as a person as well, not just as an actor. But in order to get a version where it's them, but kind of still on, talk shows are the best way to do that.
Right.
Hearing Chris Hemsworth as Ryan was a little different because I think one of the things I did listen to was his American accent. When I heard that, I was like, okay, he's got the depth, he's got the power, just in his normal voice. And so I talked with him a little bit, and just on the role and everything. And then when he's to record, he goes, I don't know, why don't you come over here? Come to my place. I'm like, you live in Australia, just so you know. I live in America, you live in Australia. He goes, yeah, come on over. And so it's like, okay, so we flew to Australia 6-7 times to record him at his house each time.
Wow.
And the first session, though, we were reading through as Ryan Pax and just kind of keeping it loose and everything. And by the end of the script, as we got towards the end, when he starts to kind of step into his own, even the way he was performing, he was sitting up straighter. He was kind of he had that kind of cadence of it. It wasn't like an imitation, but it was the rhythm of Optimus. And I literally got goosebumps. And I said, "What are you doing right now? That's crazy. What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I thought I'd try something." I'm like, "No, let's keep going that way." And I think he nailed it. It's so good.
Yeah, the transformation of his voice over the film is so terrific.
Yeah, it took a while to find exactly how it should play and when's too much, when's too little, but very happy with how it turned out. On this film, we never recorded two people together. Scheduling is very difficult when you've got superstars.
Yes, A-list cast.
Yeah. Also, different actors, I have to direct them differently. And so there's some of them I wouldn't want to pair up because it would just be too different. Right. If that makes sense.
Yes, you have to you have to be able to direct some of them differently.
Some
than
of them
others.
are super fast. Some of them take time. So, and that's just the way they work.
Yeah,
and I'm fine with that. So it becomes my job and Lynn's job to make it sound, as natural and real as if they were in the room together.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Josh, this has been super fun to get to
chat with you. You kicking me out?
Yeah. Well, no. There's one more thing. We got the Martini, the last shot of the day, where we share something that we like that is just, it can be anything. It can be a book, it can be a movie. You could do an easy one. You could pick Transformers 1 if you want.
That's my pick. You guys both stole my picks.
Do you want me to go first while you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just recently at D23, this Disney fan event down in Anaheim. It was super fun. And they had a new play set that they introduced at the show that I saw people walking around with. They were like 4-foot-long boxes. And I'm like, what is in that box? And it was the Star Tours Star Speeder 3000 vehicle play set. And it is about 2.5 foot long model of the Star Speeder from the Star Tours ride. But it's the original one with Rex in the cockpit. And what's even more crazy about this, it's a pretty good model just on the outside, but then you open it up and there's the screen and you hit the button and the screen plays the original film that ILM did back in the 80s, which is absolutely incredible and nostalgic. And there's lighting inside the cockpit and all the seats, so it like flashes when you go and turns blue when you go into hyperspace. It is a delightful recreation of the ride.
Where can I get one of these?
Yeah,
It's a D23
You
thing?
got $8,000 to spend on eBay.
eBay. Is that what they're
Really?
going for now?
Yeah, they're pretty.
I think I saw that they were $300 at the show, and I think they sold out online like instantly. But yeah, we'll take you downstairs. Ian has one. You can push the buttons and see it tonight.
You can steal it.
I'm going to take it.
Oh yeah, you can steal it.
We're whispering on the podcast, so he can't hear us.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I say something about that ride? There was a moment, you remember standing under the television right before you walk into the thing?
Yes.
And it had that like how to board
Yes.
thing. It says no flash photography. There's a kid that turns and takes Admiral Akbar's photo.
Yes.
And this killed me and my brother. Admiral Akbar, with his big fish hand, acts like he's going to backhand the kid. He like aims at him like, I oughta. And that made us laugh so hard. It's just a little detail that was like, I can't believe they left that in there.
It's so fantastic.
With this huge fish hand.
Just imagine if they let it go a couple moments longer and you get the big fish slap sound effect.
I love that original ride so much.
That's so much fun.
Yeah.
Jenny, did you bring a martini today? Or
Well,
did I steal
did.
yours?
Rob stole my martini. I also picked the new Star
Transformers
Tours
1, the new movie
toy.
coming
Yes,
out
the new
September
movie.
I'm going
20th.
to talk about that
Transformers
because
1.
that is on my list. But as I was sitting here, because I found out, 4 seconds before we started recording, that Rob stole my martini. So I've been sitting here thinking about things I've been doing and interested in, and I am now depressed because my life is boring. So this is what I've been doing. I've been 1800s Gothic mystery and horror.
Nice.
So I read The Turn of the Screw and Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
And I've challenged myself to do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day, which is also a little bit boring. And I've been reading about the Oxford comma. So
are you pro or against Oxford comma?
I'm pro. I've turned around on it.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
That is the only right way, right?
I was torn for a little while.
Okay.
So this is my politics, is debating the Oxford comma.
Josh, Oxford comma?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay. You don't. You're an
comma
exciting person with an exciting life. You don't have to think about these things.
I think about robots all day fighting each other.
Well, I am going to put Transformers 1 on my list because I did also get to see it.
What?
And no, it is fantastic. And
so much fun.
I would tell you if I didn't like it.
No, I
wish.
mean what? Like, how did you see it? What? No.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to see a crew screening of it. And I loved it. It has, like we said, so much heart, so much humor, so funny. There's no downtime. It was just perfect. So I
thank you.
am excited to see it 6 or 7 more times and for everybody else in the world to see it.
On behalf of the massive crew that I'm representing, thank you. Couldn't have done it without any of them.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, you had a bunch of nerds working on it, so.
Great nerds.
Yes.
My martini, I got one of those, speaking of expensive toys, I got one of those Robosen Optimus Primes
Oh.
that transforms by itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've been playing with it, and my kids who are 16, 13 come running in. They're like, what is this thing? And it's so cool. It like breathes. It stands there, and it's just the way it moves when it's not doing anything. It looks like it's breathing. And so it freaked my kids out. And I was like, this is my new son. So you guys need to fight for my love because you're not doing half of what this robot can do. You just sit there all day. This thing dances.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, and you can program the way you want it to do.
It's
People
speech
online.
activated, right?
Yeah, you can talk to it.
talk to
You
it?
straight up
Yeah.
go, "Hey, Optimus Prime." Is like, what's he say? But he's just like, "I'm here to wish you the happiest of birthdays," and I'm like, "Yeah, you are." And I turn to my kids, "When did you wish me happy birthday?" Never. So I love that thing so much, and then I highly recommend getting one and adopting one. I mean, don't just buy one, adopt one.
Not just to buy
Did
it.
you
I
get
love it.
your giant Transformers?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
No, we're talking about they did this promotion, these like 7-foot tall Transformers, these statues. Then they did 40 plus sets of them for all over the world.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, when you're done with those, my garden can use one or
Your
4.
poor kids are never going to live up
Well,
to.
my poor wife, she's the one. I told her this is happening, and she goes, "What? All right."
7-foot long transformer.
And I was like, "I'll go back to Chuck E. Cheese. Don't test me, lady."
Don't test me. Well played. So thank you for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast. If you have a question for the show or you'd like to suggest a topic that you'd like to hear discussed in a future episode, email us at lighterdarker@ilm.com, or you can reach us all on social media. You can look for how to reach us online as well. Show notes and transcripts for this episode and every episode can be found on ilm.com/lighterdarker, all one word. And thank you to Hacho Orfali for our musical sting at the open, and to Ben Charles, also known as Chromacy, who provided the outro music for today's episode that you're hearing now. You can find links to Ben's music in the show notes. So we want to thank Industrial Light and Magic for hosting the Lighter Darker podcast. This show is produced by Jenny Ely and myself. Today's episode has been edited by Chris Hawkinson, and we want to thank the entire ILM PR team and everyone that's working with Josh who made today's episode possible. So thank you to all of you, including Greg Gresby. So thanks so much for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast, and until next time, may your pixels be both lighter and darker. And now do we talk about the Oxford comma a little more?
I am so boring.
I don't know what that is. I still don't know what it is.
When you're listing a series of objects like apple, banana, and strawberry, do you put a comma before the and?
I want to leave now.